Commander Vex'thar of the Kethian Collective stood motionless before the viewing screen, mandibles quivering with something between fascination and pure, undiluted terror. The footage rolling before him displayed what his scientists could only describe as a catastrophic impossibility. A human warrior, alone, facing down 14 heavily armored Kron soldiers in the industrial sector of Kepler Station, and winning. Spectacularly, brutally, with what appeared to be a standard-issue wrench and sheer, unadulterated spite. "Run it again," Vex'thar commanded, his voice crackling through the neural amplifier that translated his thoughts into the common dialect. His secondary eyes fixed on the screen with the intensity of a creature watching its own imminent demise play out in high definition. The communications officer, a younger Kethian named Sorwin, hesitated. "Commander, we've already reviewed it 73 times. The data remains consistent across all." 74, Vex'thar interrupted, his primary eyes never leaving the screen. "Run it again." The footage rewound. There she was, Captain Miranda Garrett, 5'7" tall, approximately 63 kilograms of what the humans classified as middle age. According to the station manifest, she worked in maintenance. The humans relegated their warriors to fixing broken pipes and replacing corroded panels, and somehow this had not created the slightest problem for their species' continued survival. The recording showed her walking, not running, walking through the corridor with a maintenance kit slung across her shoulder. She hadn't even drawn her weapon. The Kronon soldiers had cornered her near the atmospheric processors, confident in their superiority, their exoskeletons gleaming under the station lights, their weapons charged and ready. Vex'thar's antennae drooped slightly as he watched what happened next. Miranda Garrett had tilted her head, and she had smiled. The expression contained approximately 47 different varieties of menace, all packaged in something that resembled a polite acknowledgement. She'd set down her kit, slowly, deliberately, making eye contact with the lead Kron soldier in a way that apparently meant something profoundly insulting in human body language. Then she had moved. There was no other word for it. She had moved, and the Kron soldiers had fallen. The wrench, a simple tool meant for adjusting bolts and fasteners, had become an extension of her will. She swung it with the precision of a creature who understood exactly where the gaps in their armor lay. She pivoted with the grace of something that had no business being graceful, while committing systematic violence. Her movements were economical, brutal, and utterly devastating. 1 soldier, 2, 3. They dropped like they'd forgotten how to stand. The remaining Kron had attempted to coordinate. Vex'thar had to give them that. They'd formed a defensive line, weapons raised, protocol engaged. It lasted approximately 4 seconds before Miranda simply walked through them like they represented nothing more than a minor inconvenience between her and where she needed to be. The footage showed her stepping over the last unconscious Kron soldier, retrieving her maintenance kit, and then, and this was the part that made Vex'thar's thorax clench with existential dread, she had stopped. She'd looked directly at the security camera. She'd held up a finger to her lips in the universal gesture for silence. Then she'd pressed the mute button on the camera's external panel, and the video feed had cut to black. When it resumed 5 minutes later, Captain Garrett was gone. The Kron soldiers remained unconscious. None of them had been killed. Every single one of them had been incapacitated with surgical precision. No permanent damage, which meant she'd been demonstrating restraint. The implications were nauseating.
Has the human government issued a statement regarding this incident?
Vex'thar asked, his voice carefully modulated to conceal the fact that his circulatory system had just accelerated to rates that probably weren't compatible with longevity. Sorwin's antennae flicked nervously. They claim Captain Garrett was acting in self-defense. The Kron soldiers allegedly attempted to apprehend her without proper authorization. The humans are calling it a violation of the Kepler Station Accords, and have filed a formal complaint with the Galactic Assembly. A complaint? Vex'thar repeated slowly. The humans are filing complaints while one of their warriors single-handedly eliminates an entire combat unit. Commander, technically she didn't eliminate them. They're all in the medical bay. The Kron are requesting reassignment to a different sector, but they're alive. Remarkably, disturbingly, impossibly alive. Vex'thar fell silent. This was the problem with humans. They were so aggressively normal about the extraordinary. They possessed none of the biological advantages that other species took for granted. Their bodies were fragile. Their bones were weak. They couldn't perceive ultraviolet light. They required an absurd amount of sleep. They could be poisoned by common substances that most species found nutritious. And yet somehow they kept winning. The historical records were haunting when you actually read them. The humans had fought their way up from a gravity well that would have crushed most species. They developed technology using materials that shouldn't work. They'd survived plagues that would have wiped out civilizations 10 times their age. They'd even fought several of the older species to a standstill before eventually reaching the stars. And now they were doing it with maintenance workers in industrial corridors. "Pull up her psychological evaluation," Vex'thar commanded. Another hesitation from Sorwin. "Commander, that's restricted information. We'd need to file a request with the Terran Authority, and given the current diplomatic situation..." "Now, Sorwin." The files appeared on the secondary screen. Captain Miranda Garrett's service record was extensive. 22 years with the Terran Maintenance Corps, no disciplinary action, no psychological flags. By all accounts, she was a model employee. Quiet. Efficient. Someone who fixed things without complaint and went home to her quarters without making waves. The psychological evaluation noted that she had exceptional spatial reasoning, superior hand-eye coordination, and an interesting tendency toward dry humor in her reports. An understatement. Vex'thar read through her maintenance logs and found entries like, "Atmospheric Processor 7B requires complete overhaul. It's being run by hopes and prayers at this point. I'm amazed it hasn't achieved sentience out of sheer spite." And another, "Electrical conduit in Sector 12 has finally given up on life. I respect its commitment to the decision." And perhaps most ominously, "The hydraulic system in Bay 4 is no longer my problem. I've made peace with that." Vex'thar realized with a creeping sense of dread that Captain Garrett was not just competent. She was actually clever. She was observant. She understood systems. She understood pressure points. She understood exactly how things worked, and exactly where to apply force to achieve maximum efficiency. She was, in short, a warrior by temperament masquerading as a laborer. And 14 Kron soldiers had learned this fact in approximately 90 seconds. "Has there been any communication from Captain Garrett herself?" Vex'thar asked. Sorwin pulled up a message that had arrived through official channels just after the incident was logged. It was addressed to the Kethian Command and read simply, "Please inform the Kron soldiers that their injuries are consistent with the standard application of appropriate force. I would recommend improved coordination in their tactical formations. Also, someone should probably look at that atmospheric processor near where the altercation occurred. It's making a noise that suggests imminent catastrophic failure. I fixed it temporarily, but it's not my department, not anymore." Signed, Captain Miranda Garrett, Terran Maintenance Corps, Kepler Station Sector 7. "Not anymore. Run a background check on her," Vex'thar said quietly. "Everything. Birth records, education, prior employment, military experience." "Commander, she's listed as having no military background. She's strictly maintenance personnel." "Run the check, Sorwin, and pull up any incident reports involving her over the past decade. Every single one. I want to know if this is an anomaly, or if we've simply been observing a carefully constructed illusion." The files took 20 minutes to compile. When they appeared on the screen, Vex'thar understood why the Kethian Collective was preparing defensive installations around every sector of known space where humans had established presence. Captain Garrett had been involved in 43 security incidents over the past 8 years. 43. In every single incident, she had been present, but had never fired a weapon. In every single incident, the threat had been neutralized. And in every single incident, she had filed a maintenance report afterward, discussing the incident with the kind of casual indifference that suggested she'd been more interested in the administrative paperwork than the unconscious combatants scattered around her. She'd stopped a pirate boarding action by reorganizing the cargo bay equipment. She'd prevented a terrorist attack by addressing some concerning structural weaknesses in the ventilation system. She'd apprehended a serial criminal by offering directions to someone who appeared lost and then suggesting they sit down in a reinforced chair while I completed my shift. The pattern was crystalline, terrifyingly crystalline, in its clarity. The human was not just competent. She was operating with the kind of strategic awareness that suggested she'd been trained by entities that had forgotten more about warfare than most species would ever learn. "Request a meeting," Vex'thar said finally. "With Captain Garrett, neutral territory. I want to understand what we're dealing with here." "Commander, is that wise?" Sorwin's voice carried the kind of doubt that usually preceded career-ending decisions. "Meeting with a human warrior who has demonstrated the capability to incapacitate our soldiers." "She didn't incapacitate them out of malice, Sorwin. She incapacitated them out of professional necessity. There's a difference, and that difference is exactly what I need to understand." The meeting was arranged for 48 hours later. Neutral space. Conference room. Minimal security, though Vex'thar had tactical units standing by in rooms adjacent to the main chamber. Captain Garrett arrived exactly on time, which was somehow more threatening than if she'd arrived late. She was shorter than Vex'thar had expected, more compact, built with the kind of efficiency that suggested every movement, every breath, was calculated for maximum utility. She sat across from him at the conference table, and for approximately 30 seconds neither of them spoke. Finally Vex'thar initiated the conversation. "Captain Garrett, I've been reviewing your service record with great interest." "Good for you," Garrett said. She had a voice like steel wrapped in velvet. Polite. Professional. Absolutely devoid of concern for Vex'thar's rank or status. "What did you want to know?" "I want to know why your station's maintenance division has somehow become the most effective security force in this sector. I want to know why a species that claims to have no military background is somehow capable of dismantling fully trained combat soldiers. I want to know why you're pretending to fix pipes when you're clearly capable of much more." Captain Garrett leaned back in her chair. She smiled. It was not a comforting expression. It suggested depths of competence that predators recognized in other predators. "Commander Vex'thar, I fix pipes because pipes need fixing. The fact that I've developed a certain skill set over my career is simply a side effect of being thorough in my work. When I maintain equipment, I maintain equipment. When I respond to security threats, I respond efficiently. When I'm asked to sit in a conference room and discuss my intentions with members of other species, I do that too." "You're military," Vex'thar said. "Not a question, a statement of fact." "I was, once," Garrett confirmed. "But I'm not anymore. That chapter of my life ended years ago. Now I fix pipes. That's sufficient." "And yet you continue to engage in combat operations." "I engage in self-defense operations, Commander. There's a meaningful distinction. The Kron soldiers initiated hostilities. I responded appropriately. That's not a combat operation. That's someone doing their job." Vex'thar processed this. The human was not lying. He could detect the physiological markers of honesty in her biometric data. She genuinely believed what she was saying. She genuinely considered the systematic dismantling of 14 trained soldiers to be equivalent to doing her job. This was the actual problem with humans. They didn't see violence as an existential event. They saw it as a tool, like a wrench, like a pipe, like a piece of equipment that required proper maintenance. "I have a question for you, Captain," Vex'thar said carefully. "Why did you mute the security camera?" Garrett's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. Something that suggested amusement at a level of sophisticated depth that most species couldn't achieve. "I don't like hearing myself," she said simply. "I never have. Even back in my military days, I always found the recordings of my own voice to be disconcerting. Personal preference, Commander. Nothing more." She stood. The meeting was apparently concluded. "One last thing, Captain Garrett. What exactly did you major in during your academic years?" She smiled again. That predator-recognizing predator smile. "Systems engineering, Commander Vex'thar. I spent 17 years learning how everything works, how to diagnose problems, how to apply appropriate force to the correct pressure points, how to make systems function optimally under any circumstances. She moved toward the door. She paused. Thank you for the conversation. I enjoyed it immensely. It's not every day I get to explain myself to someone who actually understands what I am. After she left, Vex'thar sat alone in the conference room for a very long time. He made a decision that day. He would recommend to the Kethian Collective that they stop attempting to treat humans as a threat. They weren't a threat. Threats were understandable. Threats could be quantified and managed and defended against. Humans were something far more concerning. They were a species that had learned to optimize everything they did. They took their weaknesses and transformed them into advantages. They took their fragility and weaponized it. They took individuals and turned them into systems that could dismantle entire tactical units, with nothing more than basic maintenance equipment and an absolutely ruthless understanding of applied physics. And they did all of this while maintaining perfect, placid professionalism, while fixing pipes, while suggesting that others sit down in reinforced chairs, while muting security cameras because they didn't like hearing their own voices. Vex'thar opened a communication channel to the Kethian High Council. Recommendation: immediate review of all human integration protocols. Current assessment suggests we have been massively underestimating the strategic capabilities of Terran personnel. Request authorization to establish permanent diplomatic liaison with human command structure. The alternative is discovery at a significantly less convenient moment. 3 weeks after the conference room meeting, Commander Vex'thar received notification that would change the trajectory of interspecies relations across the entire sector. Captain Miranda Garrett had been reassigned. Her new posting was not maintenance. Her new posting was not even on Kepler Station. She was being deployed to the Terran research vessel Pathfinder, a ship designed for deep space exploration. A ship that had, coincidentally, just received emergency distress signals from the outer territories. A ship that was heading directly into space, controlled by the Xurath Dominion, a species known for their aggressive territorial expansion and their complete disregard for pre-established agreements. Vex'thar did not believe in coincidences. He established a private communication channel with his counterpart in Terran Command, an individual named Admiral Harrison Cole, whose service record suggested he possessed the kind of strategic thinking that transcended species barriers. The conversation was brief and exceeded all expectations for diplomatic subtlety. Admiral Cole, I'm observing the reassignment of Captain Garrett to the Pathfinder, Vex'thar began. This appears to be a deliberate strategic positioning that coincides with elevated Xurath activity in the disputed territories. There was a pause. Then Admiral Cole's voice, calm and measured, responded through the neural link. Commander Vex'thar, I appreciate your attention to detail. However, Captain Garrett's reassignment is based on operational necessity and her exceptional qualifications for the mission parameters, nothing more. Admiral, with respect, Captain Garrett is a maintenance technician who has systematically dismantled every security threat that has approached her vicinity. This is not coincidence. This is deployment strategy. Another pause, longer this time. When Admiral Cole responded, his tone carried the weight of someone deciding exactly how much truth to share with a foreign military command. Commander, let me ask you something. In your extensive review of Captain Garrett's service record, did you notice anything unusual about the timing of incidents? Vex'thar had noticed. The incidents had clustered around moments when the station's security systems were experiencing maintenance downtime. The incidents had occurred in locations where standard weapons would have been ineffective. The incidents had involved opponents who were, almost universally, testing human response protocols. There were assessments, Vex'thar said quietly. Someone was testing human capabilities. Not someone, Commander. Multiple someones. The Xurath, the Krone, the Velnar Collective. Even certain factions within the Kethian military. If I'm being honest, everyone wanted to know what humans were capable of when we stopped pretending to be an emerging species and started acknowledging what we actually are. Captain Garrett simply provided them with comprehensive educational material. And now you're sending her into direct conflict with the Xurath Dominion. Now we're sending her into a situation where a Terran research vessel requires immediate tactical support and Captain Garrett happens to be the most qualified individual for the assignment. Everything else is incidental. The communication ended. Vex'thar sat in his command chamber, antennae drooping with the weight of comprehension. The humans hadn't been hiding their capabilities. They had been testing the waters. They had been providing controlled demonstrations to every species in the region, ensuring that when the moment came for actual conflict, everyone would understand exactly what they were facing. Captain Garrett wasn't a warrior pretending to be a maintenance worker. She was a message, a walking, talking, wrench-wielding communique that said, "We are more than we appear." The Xurath Dominion, unfortunately, had never been particularly good at reading subtle messages. The Pathfinder emerged from faster-than-light travel, approximately 4 light-years from Kepler Station. The ship was a marvel of engineering, roughly the size of a Kethian military cruiser, designed for long-duration missions and equipped with state-of-the-art research equipment. It was not, however, designed for combat. The research team consisted of 42 individuals, scientists and engineers dedicated to mapping subspace anomalies in the disputed territories. The mission was legitimate. The research was valuable, and approximately 7 hours into their scientific work, Xurath warships emerged from stealth positioning and initiated weapons lock. Captain Garrett was in the engine room when the alert sirens activated. She was conducting a systems diagnostic on the tertiary cooling loops. Clipboard in one hand, portable scanner in the other. She paused, listened to the alarm pattern, and accurately identified the threat level without needing to access the main communication system. 7 Xurath combat vessels, advanced weaponry, aggressive positioning. They were not attempting negotiation or standard warnings. They were positioning for an attack run. Garrett set down her equipment methodically. She sealed the secondary bulkheads with the same precision she applied to everything else. Then she initiated a personal communication to the bridge. "Captain Hernandez, this is Garrett. You're going to want to maneuver to heading 317 and reduce shield frequency to 0.8 terahertz. The Xurath targeting systems use harmonic resonance at 0.9. If you shift down, they'll lose lock-on for approximately 8 seconds. Should be sufficient time to increase distance from their weapons envelope." There was a confused silence on the bridge. Finally, Captain Hernandez responded, "Garrett, how do you know anything about Xurath targeting systems?" "It's in the technical specifications database, Captain. Under known hostile species capabilities. I read a lot during my downtime. Maintenance work gives you plenty of thinking time." The Pathfinder shifted course. The Xurath weapon systems lost lock. 8 seconds became 10 seconds, became a full advantage in maneuverability that pushed the research vessel outside the immediate combat zone. But the Xurath were not easily discouraged. They accelerated. They adapted. They began advancing toward the Pathfinder with the kind of confidence that came from possessing superior firepower and zero interest in interspecies diplomacy. "Garrett, get to the bridge," Captain Hernandez commanded. "Now." Captain Garrett made her way through the corridors of the Pathfinder, with the kind of calm that suggested she moved through crisis situations, the way other beings moved through standard Tuesday afternoons. She arrived on the bridge and took in the situation with a single, comprehensive glance. The view screen displayed 7 Xurath vessels bracketing the Pathfinder's available escape vectors. Shields were holding, but the math was unfavorable. A research vessel was not equipped to outrun military hardware. The Pathfinder had hours before the Xurath positioned themselves for a killing strike. "Captain Hernandez, I have a recommendation," Garrett said. Her voice carried the kind of confidence that made everyone on the bridge stop and listen. "The Xurath ships are powerful, but they're designed for frontal assault. Their rear shields are substantially weaker. If you position the Pathfinder on a trajectory that matches their formation spacing, you can use our maneuverability advantage to slip through their perimeter. They'll simply follow us deeper into the disputed territories," Hernandez said. "Yes, Captain, that's precisely the point. The disputed territories contain 3 active subspace anomalies. You know where they are. The Xurath do not. The anomalies create interference patterns that make targeting systems unreliable. If we navigate through them carefully, we can reach the Kethian border before the Xurath can recover targeting lock." Garrett stepped closer to the navigation console. She was not, technically, a qualified bridge officer. Her expertise lay in maintenance, in systems, in understanding how things worked under stress. But she understood everything, and her understanding was profound. There's a secondary benefit, Captain. The subspace anomalies will also interfere with their communications. Once we're inside the interference zone, they won't be able to call for reinforcement. Captain Hernandez looked at her crew, then he looked at the tactical display. Then he made a command decision that would later be studied at military academies, across multiple species. Garrett, I'm putting you in charge of navigation. Override all standard protocols if necessary. I want this ship through those anomalies and into Kethian space before the Xurath realize what's happening. Captain Garrett moved to the navigation station. She dismissed the standard helmsman with the kind of authority that had nothing to do with rank and everything to do with competence. Her fingers flew across the controls. The Pathfinder banked hard to starboard, moving away from the Xurath formation. The 7 combat vessels accelerated in pursuit. What happened next was, according to observers from multiple species, technically impossible. The Pathfinder, a research vessel with no combat modifications, no enhanced maneuvering systems, and no business attempting complex evasive patterns, executed a series of maneuvers that seemed to violate the basic principles of physics. It weaved through the Xurath formation with millimeter precision. It banked at angles that should have torn the ship apart. It accelerated and decelerated, with timing that suggested someone was manipulating gravitational forces themselves. That someone was Captain Garrett, and she was reading the subspace anomalies like they were old friends. 0.03 degrees to starboard, she murmured. Match velocity with the distortion wave at bearing 275. Increase shield harmonics by 0.02 terahertz to compensate for the dimensional shear. The Pathfinder slipped deeper into the disputed territories. The Xurath followed, but their targeting solutions were degrading rapidly. Their weapons were becoming unreliable. Their navigation systems were reporting increasingly inaccurate data. Then, quite suddenly, the Pathfinder emerged from the subspace anomaly field directly into Kethian-monitored space. The 7 Xurath vessels stopped. They did not pursue. Even hostile species respected territorial boundaries when doing otherwise meant direct confrontation with established military powers. Commander Vex'thar received the incident report approximately 30 minutes after the Pathfinder crossed into Kethian territory. The research vessel had entered under distress protocols, seeking temporary sanctuary. The Xurath had begun an attack but had been successfully evaded through exceptional piloting and strategic navigation. The captain of the Pathfinder made a personal communication to Vex'thar. Commander, we are requesting permission to dock at Kepler Station for repairs and resupply. We also wanted to personally thank you for maintaining this sector's security. Without Kethian presence, we would not have made it out of that situation. Vex'thar granted the permission, but his mind was focused on something far more significant. Captain Garrett had just navigated through subspace anomalies that most advanced navigational systems considered unpredictable. She had done it with a research vessel, never designed for such maneuvers. She had done it with the kind of precision that suggested she possessed comprehension of spatial dynamics that exceeded standard training protocols, which meant one of two things. Either humans were capable of learning and adapting at rates that far exceeded documented capability, or Captain Garrett had been trained by entities that understood dimensional mathematics at a level that most species found theoretical. Either option was profoundly concerning for anyone planning to engage humanity in direct conflict. When the Pathfinder docked, Vex'thar arranged another meeting. This time he brought Admiral Cole into the conversation as well. The human administrator appeared via quantum communication, his face projected into the conference room with remarkable clarity. Gentlemen, Vex'thar began, I have reviewed the incident reports from the Pathfinder's encounter with the Xurath Dominion. Captain Garrett's navigation of the subspace anomaly field suggests capabilities that extend significantly beyond standard maintenance expertise. Admiral Cole smiled. It was not an unkind expression, but it carried the weight of someone who had just been caught with their strategy fully exposed. Commander, I'll be honest with you. Humans have been exploring subspace phenomena for considerably longer than most species are aware. We've had research stations in the disputed territories for decades. The anomalies are not unpredictable. They simply require a specific type of neural processing to navigate safely. Captain Garrett happens to possess that processing capability. How many others? Vex'thar asked. How many others possess this capability? Enough. How many have we been deliberately positioning in strategic locations to provide subtle demonstrations of human competence? Also enough. We're not trying to threaten anyone, Commander. We're simply ensuring that when conflicts arise, our species is not underestimated. Captain Garrett entered the conference room at that moment. She was not invited, but her entrance suggested she had simply decided that attendance was necessary and had walked in accordingly. Commander Vex'thar, Admiral Cole, I want to clarify something important, she said. Her voice was quieter than usual, more thoughtful. Humans are not trying to dominate this sector. We're not trying to control anyone. We simply understand that the universe is dangerous, and weakness invites predation. So we don't advertise our weakness. We advertise our competence. We make sure that everyone understands exactly what happens when they underestimate us. She paused. The Xurath will attack us again. Different species will test our boundaries. Everyone will want to know if humans are genuinely formidable or if we're simply fortunate. And every single time we'll respond with the same message. We are more than we appear. We are harder to break than you assume. We will not surrender, and we will adapt faster than you can adjust your strategies. Garrett smiled. And it contained something deeper than the usual predator recognizing predator expression. It contained certainty. I'm going back to maintenance work, by the way. The Pathfinder needs significant repairs. The subspace navigation fried most of our secondary systems. I have approximately 4 months of work ahead of me. During those 4 months, I'll be quietly monitoring all military traffic in this sector. I'll be noting which species are positioning aggressive assets, and which are maintaining peaceful boundaries. And when I'm finished fixing pipes, everyone will know exactly what that assessment concluded. Captain Garrett, Admiral Cole said, his voice carrying a note of something that might have been pride. Are you sure you want to return to maintenance? Absolutely, Admiral. I like fixing things. I like understanding how systems work. I like the problem-solving aspect of it all. Besides, someone needs to ensure that the Pathfinder's cooling loops don't achieve sentience out of sheer spite. That would be on me. She left the conference room. Vex'thar and Admiral Cole sat in silence for a very long time. Finally, the human commander spoke. Commander Vex'thar, let me give you some advice. Don't try to understand humans using traditional strategic analysis. We don't work that way. We take maintenance workers and turn them into weapons. We take exploration vessels and turn them into combat platforms. We take the ordinary and make it extraordinary. The sooner you accept that we're not following any playbook you're familiar with, the sooner you'll stop making mistakes. The communication ended. Vex'thar made another recommendation to the Kethian High Council: immediate establishment of peaceful trade relations with the Terran Authority, shared scientific research initiatives, joint diplomatic missions, and most importantly, complete cessation of any aggressive testing directed at human personnel. The message, he believed, would be understood.